In this podcast episode, Bassem Youssef discusses the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine. He expresses his frustration with the lack of international intervention in the atrocities being committed by Israel against Palestinians. He criticizes the Israeli government for its actions, labeling them as war criminals and murderers who have been getting away with genocide for years. Youssef highlights the continuous violence and human rights violations that Palestinians have been subjected to, including the killing of children, the displacement of populations, and the imprisonment of thousands of Palestinians without proper accusations. He emphasizes the disproportionate use of force by Israel and the lack of accountability for their actions. Youssef states that he does not see a positive way forward in the current situation. He expresses a sense of hopelessness and disillusionment with the international community's response to the crisis. He challenges the notion that any country would react in a similar manner if faced with the same circumstances as Israel. He argues that the dehumanization of Palestinians and the perception of them as terrorists or lesser beings contribute to the lack of empathy and action from the global community. As the discussion continues, Youssef emphasizes the need to acknowledge the humanity of all individuals involved in the conflict and to address the root causes of the violence. He criticizes the narrative that justifies the killing of civilians based on political affiliations or national identity. Youssef highlights the suffering of the Palestinian people, emphasizing the lack of basic rights and the oppressive conditions they face on a daily basis. He explains that Palestinians are living in a state of siege, with limited access to essential resources like food, water, and electricity. He also mentions the restrictions on travel and the constant threat of violence and imprisonment by Israeli forces. The role of the government in Gaza, particularly Hamas, is also discussed. Youssef acknowledges that Hamas is the ruling authority in Gaza, but points out the challenges they face in governing effectively under the ongoing siege. He mentions the history of the conflict, including the election of Hamas and the subsequent retaliation by Israel, leading to a cycle of violence and oppression. Youssef criticizes the media coverage of the conflict, highlighting the biased narratives and misinformation that often shape public perception. He points out the discrepancy between the official Israeli reports of casualties and the exaggerated stories that were circulated in the media, leading to a skewed understanding of the situation. Moving forward, Youssef calls for accountability for war crimes committed by Israeli officials and a focus on addressing the root causes of the conflict. He emphasizes the need for justice and a fair resolution that respects the rights and dignity of both Palestinians and Israelis. In discussing potential solutions, Youssef stresses the importance of addressing the origins of the conflict and the ongoing oppression faced by the Palestinian people. He calls for a re-examination of the partition of land in 1947 and the subsequent loss of Palestinian territory in 1948 and 1967. Youssef highlights the need for a fair and equitable resolution that acknowledges the rights and grievances of both parties involved. Youssef points out that power in the conflict goes beyond military might, extending to financial support and lobbying efforts. He mentions the significant influence of organizations like the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, in shaping American politics and policies towards Israel. The power dynamics also involve religious beliefs, with some Christian Zionists supporting Israel for their own apocalyptic interpretations. Youssef expresses concern over the apocalyptic rhetoric surrounding the conflict, with some Israeli leaders and American politicians referencing biblical prophecies. He highlights the preparations for building the Third Temple in Jerusalem and the implications of such actions on the region. He warns that the convergence of religious beliefs and political power could lead to dangerous outcomes. One of the key issues Youssef believes is not being adequately addressed is the influence of money in politics. He criticizes how special interest groups and lobbyists sway politicians' decisions, often prioritizing their agendas over the interests of the general public. He sees this as a fundamental flaw in Western democracies that undermines the true essence of representative governance. Youssef acknowledges the complexity of finding a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, noting the lack of appetite for a two-state solution on both sides. He highlights the ongoing violence and the deep-rooted animosity that hinders progress towards peace. He expresses skepticism about the current trajectory of the conflict, fearing that it may continue to escalate without a viable resolution in sight.